Great, thank you everyone. So I'm Fionnuala Rogers and I am the newly elected chair of the UK Committee for the Blue Shield, having taken over from Peter in September. And I just want to give you a little bit of background about the UK Committee, our history. And then in the second half of the presentation, I wanted to go into our focus areas and an example of the type of work that we're doing, which might be quite different to some of the other national committees. And because of that, I must apologise in advance that because a lot of our work is to do with lobbying and policy, this presentation has very few pictures, so I really apologise for that. So the history of our committee, it was first considered in 1999, and there was a meeting at the British Library convened with interested organisations, the Founding Four and the National Preservation Office, to moot the idea of setting up a UK committee. And in 2000, it was decided that that would go ahead, but it would also cover Ireland as well. And then it was formally launched in 2001, and we had a launch event which Patrick Boylan actually opened, and the first chair was the director of the National Preservation Office, and the Blue Shield Committee sat within that office. They hosted us. In terms of early activities, I think the sort of earliest activity was responding to the floods in Europe in 2002, and then I think there was a lot of coordination efforts and capacity building. In 2003, the government announced that it was considering ratification of the 54 Hague Convention and the protocols. And as I'm sure you may know, they didn't actually get around to doing that until 2017, but this was when they first started talking about it, which of course coincided with the Iraq War as well. And in 2005, Blue Shield was quite active in lobbying the government for CPP protection, and also started to deliver disaster training and preparedness to organisations to protect cultural heritage. But then quite soon after it was launched, the National Preservation Office said they could no longer host Blue Shield due to funding, and I think there were various efforts to find an appropriate host to actually keep the Blue Shield going, because I think the significance was recognised. We now have a bit of a gap between sort of 2005 and 2012, when we have the launch of UK Blue Shield, which was under Peter. So I am going to just defer to Peter for a couple of minutes just to explain how that came about, given we're lucky to have him be able to fill us in here.
Okay, thanks, Fionnuala. Sorry, start a sentence at the beginning. I first got involved in Blue Shield at all because when I'd tried to talk to the UK Ireland Blue Shield in the mid 2000s, I wasn't rebuffed, but it was very clear that it was an organisation that only consisted of members of the four Founding Four organisations, and there was no leeway in their statutes to allow others to join the committee. So while I was aware of the Blue Shield, I wasn't part of it at all. And in 2012, I was asked to go to a meeting of the board of the Association of National Committees of the Blue Shield in Paris, because they knew I'd been doing quite a lot of work lobbying UK government about the ratification of the Hague Convention and other things. And so I went to that meeting, and one of the discussion points in that meeting was the split into two of the UK and Irish Blue Shield Committee, and that had been led by Lar Joy from Ireland, a very amicable split, but none of us really understood why at that point we were a joint national committee, which seemed a little bit of an unusual entity. It then became clear later as we dug back that the reason for it was, as Fionnuala has just said, the whole idea had started within the British Library, and the British Library still, whether they did or didn't, slightly open to question, but believed that they had the requirement to collect all books published in both the UK and what was now the Republic of Ireland. And so that was why it made sense to people in the British Library to have a joint committee if it didn't make sense to many people outside. So LAR and the Irish National Committee was set up a few months before the UK one in about 2012, and that's how that's about all I know really about how the two things came together. So I hope that that makes sense and fills in a bit of the gap.
That's great, thank you. And then one of the early, I think, successes was down to Peter's article that he wrote, which was a 4-tier approach to the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflict, which was published in the British Army Review. And Lieutenant Colonel Tim Purbrick, who some of you may know, had written an article, I think, on solar in the British Army Review, and he was actually sort of reading it and showing it round, and he came across Peter's article and was really, really interested, and then ended up picking up the phone to Peter, and I think essentially this was the beginning of something fantastic, because this then led to the Cultural Property Protection Unit in the British Armed Forces, which we've now got, I think, 15, capacity of 15, coming up to 18, hopefully, and is essentially operational, which is one of our huge successes for implementation of the Hague Convention. I don't know, Peter, if you have anything to add on that? No.
Not really, apart from Tim did phone me, I think it was on the 23rd of December, that I was sitting in my office just tidying up before Christmas, and I got my first unsolicited, unhassled, unpressured phone call from the MOD by, as Tim said, Prof Stone, you won't know me, but my name is, and I think it would be good to talk. And as Fionnuala says, it turned out to be good to talk.
Yeah, so I think that's a great example of why we must keep publishing what we're doing and things, because you never know who's going to read it and where it will lead. So our committee today, we're made up of members and observers. So that at the moment is members essentially, you know, could have voting rights, but we are in the process of becoming a UK charity, so the formation might change slightly, but we love having multiple observers, because they come from quite a lot of institutions such as the Red Cross, and they're really valuable input, but wouldn't actually be able to sit on our membership. We have a mailing list to input and receive the minutes of about 50 members and observers, but typically in meetings we get about 15 to 20 regular attendees across a very wide variety. In anticipation of charitable status, we've currently got 5 trustees, myself and Peter, and 3 others. And at the moment, we're actually seeking representation from the devolved nations, because we don't really have representation from Scotland, Northern Ireland, or Wales. So that's something we really want to build on in the future. This is just to illustrate the sort of varied makeup of our committee, which might be slightly different to some of the other committees. We've got the National Trust and the Red Cross. We've got a few heritage lawyers like myself, multiple academics with a variety of specialisms, which is fantastic. Historic England, the Founding Four. We have an ex-prosecutor. We've got some art market representation, which is very useful. And then we have UNESCO and DCMS attending occasionally as well. So this is how we're sort of made up. So we really do have quite a variety on our committee. And then this is just to confirm the ratification in the UK. So we ratified and implemented the Hague Convention at the end of 2017, just in time, because they called the Act, the 2017 Act, and I think we got it through in December, quite down to the wire. And then DCMS, they issued guidance, 2 sets of guidance. One was on the implementation of the Hague Convention, but then one was specifically targeted at the art market around the Section 17 offence, which is the dealing in cultural property exported from conflict countries. And then just last month, DCMS has issued and published its first periodic report to UNESCO on the implementation of the Hague Convention. And in there, one of the key successes is the Cultural Property Protection Unit, which I think we're all very, very pleased and very proud of. So the Blue Shield today in the UK, of course, we've all got the Blue Shield approach, and these are our priority activities. So we're continuing to raise awareness of the 54 Convention. It's not really widely known in the public. The art market have had the guidance, but we still have a lot to do because it is still quite recent for the UK in terms of awareness raising. Supporting CPP in British overseas dependencies and improving coordination and information sharing. That's a key priority area for us, so we can respond to emergencies. We will continue to advise and lobby the government on the prevention of illicit trafficking, and that is one of the examples of our work that I'm going to go into. And we will support the MOD in the development of the UK's CPP capability, and we'll continue to develop the partnerships that we're working on. Partnerships are very important for us, and that's why we really value the observers on our committee. So I wanted to give you an example of the type of work that we're doing and what we're focusing on. So our committee is very active in prevention of illicit trafficking and legislation and policy. And one of the reasons for that is because the UK is sometimes the second and sometimes the third biggest art market. And I think we have about 20% of the world's share of the art market, and a proportion of that is antiquities and cultural property. So that is really an important area for the UK. We've done lots and lots of activities over the years and continue to do so. Some photographs on the screen are our training that we've done in Lebanon with Joanne at Blue Shield Lebanon, training Iraqi, Syrian and Lebanese museum professionals and lawyers in prevention of illicit trafficking, typical trafficking routes, how to spot fake provenance, how to build evidence, and also training on the legislation in destination countries to help them build their claims. So we've been doing that training, which has been really successful, and also building a network between destination countries and countries of origin. So that's been something that we're really pleased with. And then we're also consulted and advised on any cultural property legislation or policy that affects the UK. So we've consulted on the EU cultural property regulations, the Nicosia Convention, and then changes post-Brexit. So this is something that we are very active in. And one example I wanted to talk about is our kind of current activity. So I'm not sure how many people on the call are familiar with an EU regulation. It was adopted in 2019, but it came into force in December last year, okay, partly into force, and it will gradually become in force between now and 2025. But essentially what it does is it requires licenses for cultural property to be imported from outside the EU into the EU. And to get a license, you now need an export license from the country of origin, or an awful lot of other information. So it really is to try and combat trafficking cultural goods, combating terrorist financing, and to try and protect cultural heritage. So the objective is absolutely vital. The way the regulation operates, it is quite onerous. it certainly will shake up the art market, and it's going to make import much more difficult, because of course the laws in different countries of origin are, vary greatly, and the dates at which you might have needed an export license, they go back decades. So it has been quite controversial. But the first article was adopted, or came into force in December, and that stated that member states would now prohibit the import of cultural property that was illicitly exported. So we haven't yet got the licensing system, and that's still being built. And I understand that that's going to be operational in the next 4 years. But at the moment, it's just asking member states to actually prohibit the import of these objects. Now, because we had the Brexit transition period, and that was actually extended till December, this prohibition actually came into force in the UK and is considered retained EU law. But the rest of the regulation wouldn't come into force because of the way that the withdrawal agreement works. So we had this quite strange position earlier this year, where we had part of a regulation, but we had no intention to follow the rest of it, which was a bit challenging. But then the UK's approach has been slightly unusual, and this is something we're quite concerned about. So in March 2021, DCMS confirmed that the ministers had decided to revoke the regulation in Great Britain, but it would continue and be fully implemented in Northern Ireland as part of the Northern Ireland Protocol. The difficulty with the UK's approach is, you can see I've put an extract from their website on the screen here, and this last sentence is really key, because if essentially they've said the regulation is far too onerous and they don't want it, but it will apply in Northern Ireland, but they're not going to change the way they handle the import of cultural goods. So this is a direct contradiction, because you can't have the regulation in Northern Ireland and not change the way you handle cultural goods. So we've been raising this with government continuously, and we've started to really look into the detail of these issues and the risk areas. And the problem that we've identified is that there's a huge risk that Northern Ireland will actually become a gateway for these illicit objects to the EU, because people will realise that once they're in Northern Ireland, they can travel freely across Europe because the regulation applies in Northern Ireland. But people will catch on that there's no checks on those goods coming in. So we're very, very concerned about this gateway, and we think that member states will also be very concerned. In the UK, it's going to be very challenging to have 3 different systems, because in Scotland, we've already got a cultural property law that doesn't apply in Scotland, but does apply in the rest of the UK nations. We think Great Britain could be a target for illicit cultural heritage, because if it's a huge art market and we've been seen to weaken our legislation as compared to Europe, we are very worried that it will be seen as the easy destination to get your cultural property into if you can't get it into Europe. And then, of course, we're concerned about this going through to Northern Ireland. We're really concerned about the reputational damage. The objective of this legislation is to combat terrorist financing and protect cultural property from conflict. So given that this is one of our first post-Brexit repeals, we're very concerned about the reputational damage for the UK, and in particular how the UK might appear at the G20 in October, where culture and illicit trafficking are on the agenda, thanks to Italy. And we just think operationally it's going to be a really confusing and onerous system for anybody to enforce, and it's already quite difficult, as many of you will know, to tackle the different regulations in play with cultural property. So our work to date, we've been sort of focusing on this particular regulation and the associated areas for quite a long time. We consulted on the regulation at the beginning in 2017. We published a position paper on the first draft. Some of our comments were adopted and the regulation was amended. in the second draft. In November 2018, we had consultation with the MEPs at the European Parliament, and some of the other European Committee members were there as well. And then between December and March, we've published another position paper on the government's approach and the fact that this is retained EU law, and we circulated that to various organisations, UNESCO and DCMS and other interested parties in government. In May, we had a press release trying to raise awareness amongst the public. And in June, we presented a briefing paper to the House of Lords about the repeal. And we were really pleased because we were actually cited and credited about 6 times during the House of Lords debate for our work and the issues that we'd highlighted. In October, we will have a policy brief with recommendations coming out in line with the G20 summit. And our ongoing and future activities, we've just got to continue to lobby and raise awareness. And we really hope to increase coordination with the other European Blue Shield committees, because even though this is a UK problem as to our approach, it is going to have a huge impact in the European member states. So we really do want to increase coordination. But that was just a flavour of the type of work that we're doing and our kind of focus and priority areas. So thank you very much.